It's been a wonderful friendship, and ever since. Paul is here to speak actually his second conference, because some of you might have been at the Vinnare I Långa Loppet conference that we did 2 years ago, which also had the pleasure to have Paul here. I know that the presentation that we will hear today is very different from the presentation you did last time, and I think there are many in here who would be very interested to know how you turn ordinary to extraordinary. So please welcome Dr. Paul Schempp from Athens.
Good morning. To continue or back up Peter's story a little bit, my involvement with Swedish sports actually began maybe about 16, 17 years ago. As Peter mentioned, I have the privilege of studying some of the greatest coaches in sport throughout the world, all sports. And one morning I was studying a Swedish coach. Some of you know the name Pia Nilsson. And Pia and I were having a conversation. I was interviewing her, and during one of the breaks, Pia and I were sitting down, and I look at her and I say, "Pia, you coach golf all wrong." Now, I tell you this only so you realize, most of you understand that Pia was instrumental in Annika Sorensen's success. So here I am telling one of the most successful coaches in the history of Sweden, she didn't know what she was doing. Tells you what I know about coaching. But Pia was very open-minded. She listened to me a little bit, and then she said, "I'm stepping down as the head coach. And I've got a new kid coming in. And if I got you two together, would you talk with him about the ideas we've shared?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to." So she organized that conference for us in Phoenix back in 1999. It was early December, much like this time of year. And so since that time, I consider it a privilege to be involved in Swedish sport. In particular, we had some great athletes and we experienced some success. So to be here this morning in Boson, which to me is one of the instrumental keys to success in Swedish sport, with you is a great honor for me. But this talk this morning isn't about me, what I say, how entertained you are. Really what it's about is there anything I can share with you that you can take back to your organization, to your players, so the success of Swedish sport continues on for many decades? That's in your hands. And so this morning really is about you. So let's begin this way, if you don't mind. Would you turn to the person to your left and to your right, who, like you, is going to be very important in this journey forward? And introduce yourself if you don't know each other. Take a few minutes and do that. The natives call her Sagamata. It means goddess of the sky. And her height is almost 9,000 meters. 8,850 to be exact. Which makes her the summit, the tallest spot on the face of the earth. And that first measurement was taken back in 1865 in a fairly remote part of the world. And when it became known that that was the tallest place on earth, there were people who wanted to stand there. So between 1920 and 1952, 7 expeditions attempted to reach that summit. 7 expeditions failed. To this day, out of every 10 climbers who attempt to reach that summit, 1 dies in the attempt. That's the challenge of climbing Mount Everest. If you met the person in front of you, behind you, to the left, and to the right of you, and if they had told you, "I stood on that summit," I'm guessing, like me, you would be very impressed. May 29th, 1953 was the first time humans stood on that summit. One was from England, and one was a Sherpa guide, Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary. Most of you probably know that story. Shortly after that accomplishment, the press was very interested in how Edmund Hillary became the first human being in millions of years to stand on the tallest spot on Earth. And the question he got was, what makes you so extraordinary? And here's what he said. He said, people do not decide to become extraordinary. Rather, they decide to accomplish extraordinary things. In other words, as human beings, we weren't born extraordinary. Anything we accomplish in life is because we decide to do so. We decide to do something that we think is really worth doing. Sir Edmund Hillary thought reaching the highest spot on Earth was something worth doing. And that's what I'd like to talk with you this morning. But before we do that, what I'd like you to do is think about somebody you know that on surface looks like a fairly ordinary person. But when you dig a little deeper, you realize in their lifetime, they've accomplished something very extraordinary. And to kind of get you thinking about that, I'm going to share with you the story of somebody that I know who's in this room today. Who, if you met her, she's the woman on the right. Most of you recognize Fanny Sunesson. To the left is some Swedish kid she brought along and didn't do too bad last year, right, Fanny? Yeah. All right. Henrik Stenson, many of you know Henrik. If you got to know Fanny a little bit and you didn't know her history, she seems like a very ordinary person. She has an ordinary family. She has ordinary friends, if you will. She's very friendly. You would be considered it a privilege if she was your neighbor. You would consider it a deep honor, like I do, to call her a friend. But on the surface, if you didn't know anything about her, you would think, like most of us, she's just ordinary. But if you know the history of Fanny in sport, you realize she's anything but ordinary. She's accomplished extraordinary things in golf. Now, how did she do it? I'm going to share one of those things that she did. And I have not talked to her about this, have I, Fanny? So she's sitting there very nervous. And I'm enjoying this very much. One of the first conversations that Fanny and I ever had was, I was looking at a yardage guide that she had actually drawn. And I thought, that's rather unusual. In this day and age, very few of the caddies ever draw a yardage guide. Most of you in golf know what that is. If you don't, really what it is, it's a blueprint of what the golf course looks like. It includes the yardages or meters that are on there, the slope of the greens, and other factors that as you play the game, you need that information. Now, most caddies would just simply at this time buy their yardage books for 20 bucks, maybe get two of them in case they lost one. Fanny was still writing hers out by hand. I'm going to guess to this day you still have most of those, don't you, Fanny? Yeah. Virtually every golf course in the world, yes?
Yeah, a lot of them, yeah.
A lot of them, yes. All right. Hopefully they're insured. No, just kidding. So I started to look at it, and it was more than just an ordinary drawing. Now, in golf, unlike a lot of sports, if you're not on the golf course, you can still play your golf ball. In football, for example, if the ball goes over the sidelines, you throw it back in. No penalty. Right? In hockey, if the ball goes off the ice, the referee drops another puck and you play. Well, in golf, if the ball goes off the course, those of you that are golfers probably have spent more time off the course than on the course. Peter and I often play together, and we're often in the woods trying to find our golf balls. What Fanny would do in her golf guide is she would mark the yardages and the hazards that were off the golf course. Now, was she and Nick or Henrik or whoever she's working with planning on ever being there? No. But oftentimes you would find yourself there, wouldn't you, Fanny?
Yeah.
And here's the key that made her extraordinary. She didn't plan to be there, but she was prepared to be there. And she'd flip open that guide, and her player, who probably at that time was a little unnerved, having to play a shot he wasn't planning on playing. But Fanny was right there with the yardage. They didn't have to go back to the course and take a penalty. They could play the ball from there. Because when you're prepared, oftentimes you don't get penalized. And Fanny was prepared. To me, it's one of the reasons that in sport, she is extraordinary. Now, do the same thing. Who do you know that on the surface is an ordinary person, but they do something in sport or something in coaching or something in organization that makes them extraordinary? Think about that. And share it with the person either to your left or to your right. Go ahead. What makes an ordinary person extraordinary? I'm going to guess most of you in here that if we didn't know your backgrounds and we had just met you for the first time, we would think you're a pretty ordinary person. I mean, you talk normally, you dress normally, you walk normally. But you're here because you're a leader. You're a coach or you help run an organization that is intimately necessary in the success of Swedish sport. So there's probably something that you've done in your life that's beyond the ordinary, the extraordinary. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. And I wanted to bring that up because some of the things that I'm going to say today are going to seem fairly obvious to you. And I hope they do, because it helps explain why you're here. It helps explain why some of the things that you do are not ordinary, but extraordinary. And what I'm going to share with you right now actually comes from two sources. One comes from the research Peter was telling you about that I do, plus other people do, on what makes people elite, what makes people extraordinary or accomplish extraordinary things. And then the second thing comes from some of my experiences in sport, some of the things that Peter and I have worked on, and then some of the other sport organizations I've had the honor to work with. So let me just quickly give you an overview of what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll drill down into them. First, I want to talk about the role of talent. A lot has been studied recently about talent. I've done a little work, not so much in talent, but something else that's kind of related to it. And I know we have a speaker today that's going to talk more about it, so I won't spend a lot of time there. The second thing I'd like to talk about is how you see the world. People who accomplish extraordinary things see the world a little differently. And I'm going to share with you how they see it and what difference that makes. Next, decision making. How do we go about making the decisions that will cause the actions that lead to extraordinary outcomes? Simple process of how we make decisions. Next, routines. Now that seems like, how important can routines be? I will tell you this, as simple as that sounds, it's absolutely critical to your success or other success that people have. Recent studies that we have finished accomplishing, they're just getting published this month and next month, we're studying people who were Olympic medal winners in the Beijing and also in the London Games. What was the differentiator between the people who stood on the podium and the people who watched people stand on the podium? I'll share with that. And then finally, I want to talk about innovative thinking. To accomplish extraordinary things, you have to think with a little more innovation. And it's not as difficult as you might think. And I've got some interesting stories that'll help make those points. There was recently a study, actually it was published 12 months ago in 2012. The title was Talent Identification and Specialization in Sport. An overview of some unanswered questions. And what this article was a summary, or what we call a meta-analysis of all the research that's been completed on how to identify talent and how to specialize in sport. For those of you that want the complete reference, I know we have some students and academics in here. Those are the authors, Gonzalez, Rama, and Figueroa. It was 2012. It was published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance, volume and issue number. And if you didn't get that down, email me. I'd be happy to share the article with you. I've got the PDF on my laptop. Be happy to give it to you. It's a nice little article to read. But here's two things that I found that really help support some of the things I believe on talent identification. Here's the first. Identifying biological variables that can predict performance is almost impossible. If you're trying to identify ice hockey players at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, what do you look for? How do you know who the superstars are going to be? Well, what this says is you can't look at height, you can't look at weight, you can't look at speed, you can't look at biological variables. Because the person who might be great at 8 may not be great at 18 or 28. Biology can change. But also, many of us know, we're all in sport, many of us know people who have been identified fairly early as being can't-miss kids. These are going to be tomorrow's superstars. And after a while, we never hear of them again. What's the differentiator? What is it, if it's not talent, innate ability, if you will, that actually puts somebody into the extraordinary level? Here it is. Motivation. Motivation is more important variable that differentiate young athletes from non-athletes than our athletic readiness. And most of us know there's lots of surveys to indicate athletic readiness. I won't identify a program that is sold worldwide based on athletic readiness. It looks good, comes in a great package, many countries are using it, and it's not producing that many great athletes. Or skill proficiency, how skillful somebody is at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, will they be skillful later on in life? One caveat to that, meaning one exception to that. A child has to learn a technique proficiently. In other words, if we're trying to develop tennis players, that person, that boy or girl actually does need a good tennis stroke. They have to have the fundamentals down, because if they don't get those down appropriately, there's nothing to build on. You can't undo that once they've reached puberty. Yvonne Lendl, most of you know who Yvonne Lendl is. Some of you know him as a great tennis player. Some of you may know him as Andy Murray's coach. Yvonne told me, we had an opportunity to meet each other several times. He told me that he felt a tennis player's stroke, forehand and backhand, was set, couldn't be changed at the age of 14. And he's probably right. So when we deal with youth sport, we have to make sure that the technique is developed soundly. Does that mean they have to be strong competitors at that age? No. But it does mean when they hit a puck, or they hit a tennis ball, or they hit a golf ball, or they kick a soccer ball, that the technique is somewhat sound, because you're going to have to build on that. That's one caveat to that. Now, can you predict the best kickers, the best strikers, the best shooters at that age? No. But the technique does have to be sound. I needed to clarify that. So, I want to tell you about a study that was done by a psychologist named Carolyn Dweck. Carolyn is a researcher at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. And if you're looking for a nice book to give a coach or somebody else for Christmas, I could recommend mine. No, just kidding. Or Carolyn's. She wrote a book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Not only is the research in it sound, but I think it's written in a very engaging way. I recommend that book to you. But what I'm sharing with you is some of the research she did. And I want to talk about one study in particular. She took a group of elementary school children, and she divided them in half. And half the group received feedback on their talent or their intelligence. In other words, let's say you were the talent group, and you would do an academic assignment, mathematics, for example. And I would tell you, oh, you're so smart. Right? Oh, or you really have a mathematical ability. You are very strong in math. You will be highly successful. That's the kind of feedback we gave those kids. Here's the outcome. First, you folks lied to your peers about your scores. They weren't as high as you said they were. Next, you avoid challenges and difficult tasks because you know you're smart. You know I'm mathematically inclined. I've been told that. But to prove it may risk proving you really aren't as smart as people think you are, or you don't have that mathematical ability. And you give up easily. You say, I can't do it. If you have a problem, a math problem, for example, and it doesn't look obvious to you, you tend not to do it. That's what happens when we praise people based on what we perceive to be their talent, their innate abilities. What was the other group? They got praised on their effort. Talent or effort? What was the difference? First of all, you people who are praised for your effort, working hard, not giving up, you're open to more challenges. A challenge doesn't scare you because you know I just have to work and I'll get it. Next, you're better at problem solving. A problem comes to you and you think about different alternatives that might happen. You're willing to work at it. You're more persistent. You don't give up. Here's a group that I'm supposed to be smart. If I don't get it right away, what do I have to rely on? But you don't rely on being smart. You rely on how hard you work. So you don't give up. You just know if I keep at it, I'm going to be successful. And then finally, they believe they can improve. They believe they could get better. So coaches, think about the feedback you give your athletes. If you're telling your athletes you are one of the most talented hockey players, volleyball players, swimmers we've ever had in Sweden, you're not doing them a favor. But when you say, I'm looking at the person who's in the swim federation, when you say to your swimmer, you know, you worked really hard today. You work hard like that every day, and nobody's going to stop you. That's the kind of feedback that takes an ordinary person and makes them extraordinary. Now let's explain why that happens. First of all, talent you have no control over. You don't have any control over how tall or short you are. You don't have any control over how many fast twitch muscles or slow twitch muscles you have. You have no control over your intelligence. So if you have no control over it, what can you do with it? You really can't do anything. But what you do have control over is this, your effort. Your effort. And you alone decide how much effort you will give something. I'm looking at Fanny, and I remember her watching you and Nick work. Did anybody work harder? No. He worked his tail off. You'd see Fanny out there, well, Peter and I used to go pretty early. And you'd be there with Nick's back, and you'd be one of the last ones to leave. You and Patrick Harrington. Yeah? In fact, I used to tease Patrick about, wasn't there any hotel rooms left? Is he going to sleep in his car tonight? Because he worked that hard when he was successful. Henrik was the same way. The amount of effort you have is completely under your control. Here's the other thing you control. Quit. When do you quit? You quit when you decide to quit. No one else. You. Your athletes. Quitting is a decision, and that's all it is. Working hard is a decision. That's all it is. Your intelligence, it's not a decision. You have no control. Effort makes the difference, and the research shows that. So again, coaches and people who are in charge of organizations, when you get people who are working very, very hard, embrace them. Those are the people who are going to be successful. Those are the people who are going to accomplish extraordinary things. And I think if you look inside yourself, you will think that everything that you've ever accomplished that was really worth something required effort. Peter mentioned husband and wife. Your relationship requires effort, sometimes more than we want to give it. Your kids require effort. Again, sometimes more than we want to give them. But that's the difference. Nobody was born a great spouse. Nobody was born a great parent. You have to work at it. And the more effort you put into it, the more reward you get from it. All right. Ian Thorpe, many people consider him a highly accomplished swimmer, said this quote, and I think it captures it beautifully. I have his permission to tell this story, so I will share it with you. Some of you know Richard S. Johnson. Richard won the U.S. Bank on the PGA Tour, and is an accomplished golfer. Ricard and I have been working together for a number of years, and at one point, he would get very, very angry over a shot he just hit. And he would be so angry, it would affect the next shot he was going to hit. And it took a while to realize after you've hit that shot, you have no control over it. So you let it go. What you do have control over is the next shot. So let's give that our full attention. Let's give that our full effort. And Richard, when you walk off that golf course, if you walk off knowing you gave it your very best effort, no one could ask any more of you than that. You can't ask any more of yourself than that. And I think that's true for all of us, isn't it? Some of you have seen my presentations before, and I hesitated not to use this, but I think it makes the point, and I really want to do it again, because it's going to lead into the next thing. How people who are extraordinary make decisions. See the world. How they see the world. Do we have any tennis coaches in here, or tennis people? Okay. You are not allowed to do this. Because you're going to get it. This is part of a study that we have done with expert tennis coaches and novice tennis coaches. Novice tennis coaches were people who were coaching tennis for 2 years or less. Experts had been coaching for more than 2 years and had achieved extraordinary results. In fact, of the 24 coaches we studied, all of them had been named Coach of the Year by the International Professional Tennis Registry, and 2 of them had been Davis Cup captains. Right? So they were very highly accomplished tennis coaches. And one of the things that we did is we sat them in the room, and we put slides up. And we only had them watch the slides for 15 seconds, and then we shut the slide off. And we asked them to do this. Take a quick look, because I'm going to do it to you right now. You got it? All right. Write down everything you remember. Those of you who have a piece of paper, just write a couple of notes. And once you have 4 things down, share it with the people to your left or to your right. The novices are on the left, the experts are on the right. Novice coach is on the left, the expert coach is on the right. What do you see as the difference? Yes, technical. Yeah, good. What else? Yeah, very specific. Focus. Yes. Be a little more specific. Focus on what?
On what the believes.
Yes. Good. Like that. Anything else? All right. Here's what we found. It's on the PowerPoint slides, but I'm going to just explain it while you watch this. The first thing we noticed is that the amount of cues or factors was just about the same. In other words, if you look at the number of cues here and the number of cues here, they're just about the same. So when we hear that experts see more than the rest of us, that's not true. They see just as much as everybody else. The difference is in what they see. And this leads to, I want to make that point because one of the things we found is that expert coaches, elite performers, aren't necessarily more intelligent than anybody else. They don't have bigger brains. They don't store more information. The difference tends to be in what they see, not how much they see. Now I want to get a couple more points. First of all, as people mentioned, they focus only on factors that influence performance. Again, they identified only factors that influence the performance. The colors of the uniforms, the surroundings, the weather, didn't notice that. Only things that mattered for performance. Second thing, and this is critical, things that were actionable, things that could change. If it couldn't be changed, they didn't notice it. Why is that important? Yes, development, absolutely. You're not going to change somebody from being right-handed to left-handed, are you? No. But you can change the position of their hand. You can change the extension of the elbow. You can change those things. So you're right. If we're going to, as a coach or as a leader, make a difference tomorrow over today, we have to find things that we can change. We have to identify things that will actually influence the performance. Everything else is secondary. And then finally, they make inferences. In other words, they prioritize the information they saw and they infer. If, for example, I got that player to extend their legs just a little more, they're going to get more power into their stroke. That's an inference. We don't know that for sure, but we infer that. When I talk about thinking in a minute, I'm going to show you some research that shows that oftentimes in sport we think about being in the present. No. You want to be slightly in the future. And that's what these coaches were doing. The experts looked at things that, if changed, would make a difference in the future. I'll talk more about that when I get into the decision making a little bit. So, extraordinary decisions are targeted toward what makes a difference, what achieves the goal. Fanny and I were talking this morning about how important goal setting is. I've been hired by the Taiwan Olympic Committee, and I was sharing this with Fanny. They were very clear about why they were hiring me and some of the people that I'm working with. Here's what they said. We want to win medals at the Olympics. I love that. Why? Because it's clear. All right, we're going to win medals in 2016. That we have some time with. Not a lot of time, but some time. So back that up. What does that mean we have to do the month before the Olympic Games? 2 months before the Olympic Games? 1 year before the Olympic Games? Today. What do we have to do today that will help us win medals in 2016 in Rio de Janeiro? That's what goal setting does. And that's what experts make decisions on. They don't make decisions on things that don't influence performance. They don't waste their time with things like petty arguments. They let it go. They realize that the idea isn't to win every battle, it's to win the war. So focus on the battles you know you can win and the battles that will help you win the war. Everything else is just a waste of your time and your energy. So focus on factors that will make a difference. That's how the people who do the extraordinary think. I was kind of teasing Fanny a little bit because she would always say, well, we're going to be at, for example, the Masters. Come and say hi. Yeah. You watch Fanny at, Peter, you know this, you watch Fanny at any golf tournament an hour before, 2 hours before, she is so focused that I felt like if I said hi to her, she'd punch me. Not really, I knew you wouldn't, Fanny, but you look like it. I mean, you were into what you were doing, entirely focused. Because you know that's what required to achieve a goal. You wanted to make sure all the clubs were in the bag that needed to be. You wanted to make sure the bag was where it needed to be, so when Nick or Henrik showed up, you had it. You wanted to make sure that you had everything that needed to be there to be successful. Focus not on you doing a good job, but on you and your player being ultimately successful. That was the whole point. They also focus on what's going to make a permanent solution. They don't just try to solve a problem. Let me say it again. They don't just try to solve a problem. They try to solve a problem well. They try to say, what's the best solution? Not what is a solution. What's the best solution that I have? So their ego isn't always wrapped up in what they're doing. When I said to Pia Nelson, Pia, you coach golf all wrong, she didn't get upset with me. She wanted to know what I was talking about. Maybe there was something I could tell her that would make a difference in her coaching. Kind of arrogant on my part, but open-minded on her part. And that's how people who accomplish extraordinary things think. They think maybe they can learn something. I'm going to talk about a great coach in a few minutes. His name's Bobby Bowden. He coaches American, well, he did. He coached American football. He was the most successful football coach in the history of college sports. We were doing a study with Bobby. He was doing a coaching clinic, and we were walking out, and a second-year assistant football coach from a high school, not a university, but a high school, comes up to him and says, Coach, I've got a great defense that I think you could use. And I'm standing there, this guy is a second-year assistant high school coach. He's talking to one of the most successful coaches of all time. What can he possibly tell Bobby Bowden? But Bobby listened to that kid, coach, like this kid was the most successful coach of all time. He listened intently for about 40 minutes. And then we started walking out again, and I said, Coach, what was that all about? I mean, what was he going to tell you? He looks at me, points a finger, and goes, you never know where the next great idea is going to come from. You never know where the next great idea is going to come from. And I'm standing there thinking, I'm an idiot. How come I didn't realize? Maybe that kid did have a brilliant idea. I mean, how old was Bill Gates when he designed DOS, Disk Operating System? He was 18 years old. What if Bill Gates showed up that day and said, Paul, I have this great system for computers. And I said, you're 18 years old. What do you know? I'd be right where well, hopefully I'm not like that. And they're supported with contingency plans. In other words, if plan A doesn't work, what's plan B? If plan B doesn't work, what's plan C? And I'm sure most of you do that. I'll give you a personal example. I wanted this session to be very successful. Peter is a dear, dear friend. And I would not come here if I couldn't give him my very best effort. I knew Fanny was going to be here. I wanted this to be something that Fanny could be proud of. I've worked with some of you before. I know I've got athletes that I work with. I wanted this to be successful. All right, so what did I do to help make this successful? Did I have plan A? Yes. I rehearsed this presentation many times. I told Fanny, this is my 7th time giving this presentation. This is the first time it's in front of people. So let me know how this was. Now, technology. Fortunately, I made sure the technology people were right in front of me. If I screw up, they're going to help me out. I've already checked that. But I have this to help me move the slides, so I don't need somebody to do it for me. This comes with a little disk drive, so I have my presentation on that disk drive. What if this didn't work? I've got batteries. I also have another thumb drive that if this one didn't work, that would work. What if this computer doesn't work? How many of you think I got another computer? Yeah. So I have contingency plans. And I'm guessing, Fanny, you had them too when you played, didn't you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing all of you have that. And that's how experts think. It's not like, here's my solution, this is how it's going to work. No, experts know they have a solution, and then here's plan B, here's plan C, here's plan D. When you begin to think like that, it becomes much easier to accomplish extraordinary things. All right. I want to talk about forward thinking and backward thinking. Because experts use forward thinking. Novices or poor performers use backward thinking. And here's what I mean by backward thinking. Backward thinking is when you see a problem, you immediately come to a conclusion, and then you start to think backward to justify that conclusion. Okay? The example I like to use is going clothes shopping. Most of us have done that in our lifetime. And so we go, we don't necessarily have it planned out what we're going to buy. But we see a jacket, for example, and we say, that's a beautiful jacket. I like that jacket. Ooh, and it's a good price. And so we buy that jacket. Now we start to think of all the reasons we need this jacket. Winter's coming up. I need a warmer jacket. This is a jacket I could wear either giving a presentation or maybe in a social occasion. Lots of uses for this jacket. I don't have a jacket this color. So I start justifying all the reasons I needed this jacket after I bought it. Most of you have probably been in that situation, yes? Yeah, I hear laughter, meaning, yeah, more times than I care. So we get the jacket home, and what happens? It really wasn't as great as we thought. We really didn't need that jacket. So if you're a guy, you put the jacket on a hanger, you stick it in the closet, you never see it again. If you're a woman, you generally take it back and try to exchange it for something else. They're a little smarter than the guys. That's backward thinking, and most of the time those decisions aren't very good. Forward thinking doesn't work that way. Forward thinking comes with first defining the problem. I was in Taiwan last week, and again, I'm going to use this as an example if you don't mind, and we were there on a fact-finding mission. We were working with the swim program. And again, they want to win medals. So we had an opportunity to tour the country. We went to 3 different cities, their 3 largest cities. We went to their swimming facilities. We met with some of their coaches, and we met with some of their athletes. And we were impressed with a couple of things. First of all, we were really impressed with the quality of their swim technique. They've got great swim coaches for the kids in Taiwan. And so their technique is absolutely solid. Their facilities, they have more swimming pools per capita, I mean on average for their people, than most anywhere else in the world. And their facilities are first rate. Most of them are 10 years old or less, are newer. So facilities wasn't an issue. So why aren't they winning medals? Well, one of the things that we noticed, what's the problem? Why aren't they winning medals? One of the things we noticed is their physical strength isn't that great. So you can see that in water. I mean, good technique, but if you know anything about international swimming, most of them are physically fit. Would you say? Pretty much so? Yeah. But these kids weren't. I mean, these kids were like rail thin. So we started looking around. What were the facilities they had for conditioning? Non-existent. There was no weight training facilities for these kids. Talk to the coaches. What did they know about training? Nothing, really. We asked the athletes, how important is training to you? Nothing, really. One of the people that was with my group saw that the first question was, well, do they have places where they can work out? Weights, if you will, machines that they can use. And the answer was no. And so her immediate response, thinking backward, would be what? Yeah, well, not just why not, because the money was there, but let's buy training equipment. Let's buy weights. In fact, she wanted to put in what they call rocket towers. I've never heard of one. Have you heard of a rocket tower? No. It's what they're using at the United States Olympic Committee. That's another thing. Most Americans, the problem to the world's the solutions to the world's problems is let's do it like America. Yeah, I don't really go along with that one. I'm sure most of you understand that. And so she wanted to buy training equipment. And I'm thinking, is that really the problem? Is the problem they don't have equipment? No, I don't think that was. What is the problem? So I could see 5 years from now, there would be a great set of brand new equipment that nobody used in Taiwan. Can you see that? So we needed to drill down a little bit more. We had to define the problem. First that I came up with is the coaches didn't understand the importance of physical conditioning for their swimmers. They didn't see if the swimmers were physically stronger, if the swimmers had stronger cores, if the swimmers had more flexibility, that great technique that they have would make them go faster. So, is the lack of knowledge on the part of the coaches critical? Yes, it is. The athletes didn't know the importance of conditioning. Now, if I was going to ask you this, what's the real problem? The athlete's lack of knowledge or the coach's lack of knowledge? Coaches, absolutely. Why? They do the training, yes. And they teach the athletes, yes. So if we gave clinics to athletes, would it make a difference? No. Because if I teach an athlete how to do a curl, is he or she going to do a curl? No. If I teach a coach the importance of a curl and show them how to do it, will they teach the athlete? Yes. And if we give the coach a bonus, that if their athletes achieve a certain level in fitness, do you think the coaches are going to reinforce that? Yes. So what really was the problem? The problem was the coaches didn't have the knowledge they needed. And do you think if you gave coaches the information they needed to understand the importance of physical conditioning, would equipment really be an issue? No, it wouldn't, for two reasons. One, if I know it's really important to have, I'm going to be talking to Karen about getting me more money to get me equipment so my people can work out and I can have successful swimmers. All right. If she says no, which I'm guessing she will, that I'm not getting more money, well, what am I going to do? Maybe I can build some. Maybe there's techniques I can use that don't need equipment. Maybe I could get cheap things like bands, for example, right? Or kettlebells. Or maybe there's a local gym I can use. I get very creative because I know how important it is. So to define the problem leads to the next one. What's the factors causing the problem? And in this particular case, it was the lack of knowledge by the coaches, because it wasn't in their development program. They never knew that sort of stuff. So what are the solutions we have? What would you suggest we do in Taiwan? Yes, say it louder, Fanny, you're not shy. Instruct the coaches, yes, instruct the coaches. All right, now how do we do that? First of all, get them to sit down and listen. Is that going to work with coaches? Oh yeah, no. Do it! Yeah, they got to do it! So let's bring a physio over. Let's find some rooms where we can do this. Let's maybe find some equipment manufacturers that would love to sell equipment to coaches. Maybe they'll donate some. Now we can have seminars where the coaches are actually working out and they begin to understand that. Maybe we could supply them with training programs that have worked well, maybe in the USA, maybe in Australia, maybe in Sweden, maybe somewhere else in the world. Japan, by the way, is doing it right. Those of you that have I've been trying to convince Peter, you got to stop in Japan. Do you know their success in volleyball? Astounding. And we're talking about a country where most people are this tall. Again, talent, physical characteristics, no. Motivated, you better believe it. All right. So then we come up with what are the possible solutions, and then what's the best solution? And that's how the experts think. They're not so quick to come up with a solution and say this is the solution to the problem. They're very careful about going through to make sure they understand the problem, to make sure they know all the variables that are involved, and to make sure that they have the right solution. And if that doesn't work, what's the next solution? And what's the next solution after that? Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. And again, that's how they think. Could we all do that? Yeah, we could do that. All right, I wanted to share this with you because it's how thinking strategically. And it's showing a new trend in the way successful athletes work. It's showing a new trend in the way successful athletes think. Do we have anybody in here that's involved in triathlons? Triathlons?
Yeah.
Okay, over here. All right. This research was actually done with triathletes. And it was during recreational triathlon, so not elite level. And what they were able to do is analyze people who were in the front of the pack, people who were in the middle of the pack, and people who were in the back of the pack. In other words, the people who finished last. And they wanted to know what was the difference in the way they think. You found that? Okay. Most of you could probably relate to that. And here's what they found. They had 3 types of thinking. The first was passive, like you saw the novice coaches. All right, boy, he's wearing a nice uniform today. Oh, those are great looking shoes. Maybe I'll get some shoes like that. Oh, it's a nice day today. All right? Kind of passive thoughts. And if you look, the people at the front of the pack had almost 0 passive thoughts. They didn't think like that. They didn't notice the weather unless it was going to affect their performance. They didn't notice the clothes of the people next to them or what kind of shoes they had. Didn't influence their performance. You look at people who are at the back of the pack, and it was over 40% of their thoughts were passive thoughts. Things that really didn't influence performance. Now, active thoughts are what's in the present. Things like, what's my heart rate? Or where am I in the pack? Or what mile am I on? Or how do I make my transition a little faster while I'm sitting there? How do I get my shoes tied? And if you know something about triathlons, that's an important factor. Right? Is my helmet on and buckled before I leave the transition area? Right? Those are active thoughts in the present. And you notice, in front of the packers, over 80% of the time, we're constantly evaluating the current situation. People who were kind of in the back of the pack, they did it about half the time, but they weren't overwhelming. People in the middle of the pack were a little bit better. But here's the biggest difference, right here. Proactive decisions. Those are decisions about the future. It is now we'll say it's an Ironman competition, which means that towards the end of that race, you're exhausted. This is a race that could last, the fastest ones are about 10 hours, right? 8. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I've got friends who compete in that, and in about the 60 age group, about 11 and a half. Can you imagine 8 hours? It's incredible. You can. You have to, coaches, yeah. All right, but can you imagine the last event is a marathon? So 26.2 miles, all right? We're at mile 20, and we're thinking about how we have to finish. Not where we are now, not what our heart rate is, not anything along that line, but things like, do I need to take a final goo or nutrition to get me through the end of the race, or am I good? Do I need more water to get me through at the end of the race? Who's in front of me? And how can I pass them? And where should I pass them? In other words, thinking in the future strategically. And we notice that's the biggest difference between the proactive. We notice back of the packers never think that way. They don't think about the actions they need to take in the future. So if you look at most of the thoughts of the front of the packers, they're either active, what I need to do now, or what I need to do in the future. People who are at the end of it, they're either thinking about things that really don't influence performance, or they're thinking about things that are just currently in the present. I'd like to see more research done in this, and again, this is triathlon. I don't know how it would relate, for example, to track and field athletics or to swimming. I'm going to guess in some way it might, but I thought it was an interesting analysis. They're going to redesign their triathlon program. All right, so expert decisions are flexible and they're proactive. They're thinking in the future. They're not just about the present. And here's the biggest difference we found with a study we did with basketball coaches on decision making. Novices and experts, we like to do that a lot. Who do you think was more willing to change their game plan, the experts or the novices? Experts. Yes, the experts. Because they were saying, is this working? If not, because they had the goal in mind. Are we scoring points? Or are we keeping the other team from scoring points? If it's not working, they changed immediately. The novices, they had a game plan and they tried to follow it. This is our game plan. In fact, they'd say to the athletes, you're not following our game plan. The athletes were a little smarter. Your game plan's not working. So we need to change. You can't be afraid to change. All right. I'm sure this has happened to all of you. You've been asked the question, can you do more with less? We're cutting your funding. We're cutting your hours that you have access to the facility. Can you do more with less resources? The answer is no. The answer is no. Sorry, you can't. You can't do more with less. So what can you do? Because you know what? You're still going to lose those resources. If I gave you all the resources in the world and you were really good at what you do, you could probably do some amazing things. Is it easier to climb Mount Everest today or back in 1953? Today, yeah. What's one of the reasons it's easier today? Technology, yeah. We have things like oxygen that we can wear. We have better clothing that we can wear. I can't imagine what Sir Edmund Hillary was wearing when he went up there. But he certainly wasn't wearing the best gear that we could find today. Think about I'm speaking to the choir here. I mean, how many of your early explorers, think about how they were dressed versus today. So much better today. All right. Let me give you a little quote from Charles Darwin that I think really makes this point well. He said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one that's most responsive to change. And that's what it is. You got to be responsive to change. I'm going to switch it a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question. Just think, and you don't have to answer this to anybody. How much of your day is spent on email or social media? How much of your day reacting to interruptions? Must pick up the phone. I have a policy. I do not answer the phone in my office. That's what voicemail is for. If I'm in my office, I'm thinking, and I can't think that well that if you call me and you interrupt my thoughts, I can get back to them. Leave me a message, I'll call you back. Pia Nielsen, who I talked to, if any of you talk to her on the phone, she has a limit of 5 minutes, and she's off the phone. I love that. I'd rather be doing something else. Hopefully you're not thinking that right now. Things you can't say no to, that's a problem I have. Somebody asks me something like Peter, and I say yes, and then I think, why did I say yes? Meetings. I know that's a popular activity here in Sweden. I think it's your most popular recreational sport. Multitasking, doing multiple things at one time. By the way, the research says that doesn't work. You can't do anything well if you're trying to do 2 or 3 things at the same time. Web surfing, checking out what's on the internet, or finally chatting with colleagues. Where this comes from is they did an analysis of corporate Fortune 500 companies in the world, and they found the majority of people at most of those organizations spent the majority of their time doing these things. So it affects proficiency. We need more efficient routines. Routines. You all have them. I mean, you get up in the morning. You probably get up to the same alarm. Maybe it's a radio, maybe it's a sound. You probably get up around the same time. There's probably something you do first. There's something you do second. There's something you do third. It's a routine. It's automatic. You don't have to think about it. It just happens. In fact, if I asked you what did you do this morning, most of you would have to probably think fairly hard. If I asked you, most of you drive cars. What's the first thing you do when you get into a car? You probably have to think about it, even though it's an automatic routine. It's efficient. And this is what we find with experts' routines. They're highly efficient. They get the job done. They're purposeful. We do it for a reason. When you get up in the morning, there's certain mundane tasks, I'm going to talk about in a minute, that get done efficiently. So you don't spend a lot of time on things that really aren't that important. So it helps us minimize the time that we devote to the everyday, the mundane, and repetitive tasks. Experts are very, very good at cutting out what we might call wasted energy, wasted effort, things that do not contribute to our major goal, winning championships. Let's cut out on a daily basis the things, or limit the things that consume our time, that we can use to better effect. And experts are very, very good at that. So time management, and it allows us to focus on the significant issues, the things that might come up, the challenges that we face. That's the advantage of routines. And I encourage you on a regular basis to look at your daily routines. If you work in an office, what do you do in the office that you could change that will make your time more efficient? I'll give you one suggestion that the research shows. How many of you check email? Oh, good. How many of you check email in the morning? Don't. Because it distracts you from the things that are most important in the office. What they say is, wait until after 11 o'clock in the morning and then check email. Check email when you don't, your mind isn't quite as fresh as it needs to be. Most of us, not all of us, most of us are most productive first thing in the morning. So to use that energy to the most important tasks you have that day. And hopefully it's not a meeting. All right, I told you we just finished a study with gold medal winners. And rather than give you the statistics, I'll tell you one story about the importance of routines. They were on the starting blocks. This is in Beijing. And most of us have routines just before a competition is going to take place. And if you know something about swimming, you don't get the hat, the swim cap, until you're on the starting block. And then they come and they hand you your cap, bless you. You have to have your name on it and your country's flag. So they're on, for those of you that watch the Beijing Games, the swimming events, realize they had those compression suits. So the material was a little different in Beijing than it was in London. So they're passing the hats out. And we have two Americans in this event. I won't identify the event because I don't want to identify the swimmers. But one of them was predicted to win the gold medal. It was not Michael Phelps. One of them was predicted to win the gold medal. One of them we consider just being lucky to be up on the block in the final event. We really didn't think he was even going to qualify for the finals. And so they get the hats. And the one that was supposed to win the gold medal looks at it and says, this isn't the right material. This isn't the kind of material I've been training with. This is the old material. So he puts the hat on. And what do you think he's thinking about his entire race? Came in fourth. Fourth. All that training, all those years, all those early mornings and late nights, gone because he's thinking about what's on his head, which, you know what? If you don't know anything about swimming, I'll tell you right now, has very little to do with your success in the water. Michael Phelps didn't get out of the water and say, I won because this is a great hat. The guy who was lucky to be there looked at it and laughed and said, somebody screwed up again. I've been swimming all my life with this cap. Put it on and was kind of laughing about it, got in the water. A few minutes later, stepped on the podium to receive a bronze medal. What does that tell you? Did one have better training techniques? Did one have more talent? No. Had to do with how they got on the blocks, the routines. And this is what we found. First of all, their routines make them comfortable. So if having an iPod or an iPad with music makes you comfortable, that should be in your routine. Next. They could accommodate distractions. Gold medal winners know something's going to go wrong. They just know it. It does. It always does. The bus gets a flat, so we're late. So rather than 20 minutes to warm up, I've got 5. Okay, I got 5. It is what it is. It's the wrong material on the hat? Okay, it is what it is. How often do things go off perfectly? They don't. So with your athletes, get them used to the fact that there's going to be distractions. It's just part of the routine. You roll with it. And then finally, it allows them to focus on what's most important in the event. That's the purpose of the routines. And whatever it takes, that should be your athletes' routines on a daily basis, on a competition day in particular. That's what makes a gold medal winner. Marion Donovan. Most of you probably don't recognize her, but I'll tell you this. She's impacted almost everybody's life that's sitting here today. In 1948, she was a housewife. 3 kids. Her husband traveled. He was a salesman. Her youngest, who was 3 months old, was very ill one night. The 3rd time she had to get up to change the sheets because the baby had, let's just say, did what babies mostly do. And so she had to change not just the bedclothes and the diapers, but the sheets and the mattress pad, and the mattress was wet. 3rd time. She's carrying that load of laundry into the bathroom to put that away. And she says to herself, there's got to be a better way. And she spots a shower curtain. And she gets an idea. So she takes the shower curtain down, pulls out a pair of scissors, cuts it up, pulls out a diaper, goes to her sewing machine, sews the shower curtain onto the diaper. And she called it a bodie. Today we call it Pampers. So what does it take to be an innovative thinker? You have to find yourself neck up in... No, I'm just kidding. All right, innovative thinking. What does that require? First of all, you associate things that seem completely different, disassociated items. For example, what does a shower curtain and a baby's diaper have in common? If you're Marion Donovan, you put them together and you got a solution to a big problem. That's one way innovators think. They question all the time, asking why, what if, or why not. Some of you are probably too young to remember, but there used to be a myth in sports that if you're training, you do not drink water. How many of you remember that? A couple of you do. Yeah, you do not drink water because you're going to get cramps. We used, in the U.S., I don't know if in Sweden you thought the same thing. You don't go swimming after you eat because you're going to get cramps. When was the last time any of you had a stomach cramp? So there's a football coach, I mentioned his name already, Bobby Bowden. Bobby coached at Florida State University. And those of you who've been in Florida know how hot it can be. Pre-season football training, and you notice the uniforms these guys are wearing without their helmets, was in August, the hottest month of the year. But in practice, you could not drink water. Oddly, in a game, you could drink all the water you wanted. And Bobby realized that they weren't getting stomach cramps in the game, so if they could drink water in the game, why can't they drink water during practice? So he started giving his athletes water. And guess what happened? Not only did they not get stomach cramps, but they actually performed better because they were properly hydrated. Because he asked the question, why not? Why not give the athletes water? And every day we have those kinds of myths that we face. We think things have to always be the way they were, and we don't question why. People who find a different way to do something, people who are extraordinary, are always asking those questions. Why or why not? Innovative thinkers also observe. They pay attention to details, especially people's behavior. Most of you probably recognize this guy, Steve Jobs. Oddly, sometimes in our life we have a chance to meet an extraordinary person. We don't know at the time just how significant that can be. Well, I had a chance to meet Steve Jobs. I was a faculty member at the University of Oregon. This was back in 1986. and there was a technology fair on our campus. And I heard Steve Jobs was going to be there. Now, Steve at the time had invented the Macintosh computer, which I was using. He had also been fired from Apple. He didn't have a job. And so he was out. He started, as some of you may remember, a new computer company called Next Computer. So most people in technology at the time absolutely avoided him. They thought he was a pariah. They thought he was yesterday's news. So I walked into the technology fair, and he was all the way at the end of the hall, and nobody was around him. So I, being a PE teacher, what did I have to lose? And so I walked up to him. Fortunately, Jobs was the kind of guy that if you were in a conversation with him, you did not have to worry about what you were going to say. He did all the talking. But I want to go back to the point about attention to details. So we're starting to talk, and he's telling me, I said, so where did the idea for like the Macintosh and the Next Computer come from? And he said, when you go back to your office, where are you going to sit? I said, well, at my desk. And he says, what are you going to look at? And I said, my desktop. And he said, yeah, that's why they called the screen on the Macintosh a desktop. He said, that's where people work. He said, what are you going to find on your desk? I said, a lot of crap. He said, no, what does it go in? And I said, well, it should go in files. He says, yeah, that's why we created file folders. And on the Macintosh, they even made it look like a file folder. And then he asked me a question. He said, do you know the difference between Bill Gates and myself? And what I wanted to say was, Gates has a job. Fortunately, I bit my tongue. And he said, Bill Gates believes people need to adapt. People need to adapt to new technology. He said, I believe technology needs to adapt to people. Think of the brilliance of that. And then he showed me something on the Next Computer. He hit a button, and these little lips come up, and it says, you've got mail. They made a movie about that. But he said, yeah. When I want to talk to you, what do you look at? You look at my lips. So if I send you a message, you're going to look at lips. Now, is that a great technological breakthrough? No, but it shows you the way he was thinking. He looked at the everyday people's behavior, and he found a way to improve how we do it. Experiment. Try new perspectives. That's how innovators think. Peter and I, in our camp, we were always doing weird things, weren't we? The players, fortunately, loved it. One year we had a weather balloon that we filled up with like 20 of those huge bottles of helium. We put that up in the driving range, and we had the players try to hit it. They loved it. Another thing we did is we gave them awards, prizes for everything we did, Swedish candy in particular. With the pros, the second year, Peter says, wait a minute, these guys make millions of dollars. We can't be giving them salt licorice, Swedish fish. So Peter came up with these nice bottles of wine, CDs, books, and the players said, we could buy these. Where's the candy? Right? All right. Network. And that's what today really should be about. That's why you met people behind you, in front of you, left or right. You are your greatest resources. Nobody else understands the problems you face as an organizational leader or as a coach better than the people in this room. So the better you can get to know them, the better you're going to be. And that's where I really want to close with that. Just as a quick review, how do you turn the ordinary into the extraordinary? It takes some effort. It's how you see the world. It's the way you make decisions. It's how you do your everyday routine activities. And finally, how you look to make tomorrow a better place to be than today. I'll close with that. These are all yours.
Thank you.